The other function we want to take a look at in this lecture is called the show function. The show function, which actually comes from the message box class, is very similar to the input box function. It's going to display a box, a new dialog box. The only difference is it doesn't display or include a text box for the user to type in any user input. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to be doing some user input, it's just not with a text box. So we're going to get the dialog box, and it's going to include specified text as part of the message. It can also include captions, buttons, icons, default buttons, additional options, and we can even include a help button. Now I should mention for Windows programs, in order to take advantage of the help button, there must be an associated or specified help file. We're not going to worry about that. In fact, we're not going to worry about most of these options. We're only going to focus on the text that's displayed and using buttons and how to have the user interact with those buttons. Now I should mention that the show function returns a different data type that we haven't seen in other programming languages. It's actually going to return a type that's called dialog result. This is very unique for Visual Basic. Instead of trying to explain what the data type is, let me give you some examples, and I think they'll give you an idea of what we're doing here. So examples of values of type dialog result would be like yes, no, okay, cancel, and so forth. These types of values usually come from clicking on buttons that the user would interact with. So what we're saying here is if the user clicks on a button, there is a value associated with that button. And there are different types of buttons. There's a yes button, a no button, an okay button, and so forth. That is the value that actually gets returned for this type of box. Now, the show function has several arguments that we can use. We're only going to worry about the first three arguments, as these are the more commonly used arguments for the function. The first argument we have is a message, and this is going to be a string. This is simply going to be the main message that appears in our dialog box. So this is what we want to communicate to the user. The second argument is a caption, which is also a string. This is simply going to be whatever is displayed on the title bar. This is pretty much the title argument from our input box function. So whatever you want to appear on the title portion of our dialog box, you would put that under the caption argument. The third argument is something we haven't seen before. It's actually going to be the buttons argument, and the data type for this is message box buttons. So this is a new data type that we haven't seen yet, and this actually gives us several options of what types of buttons we would want to have on our dialog box. So we can just simply specify what types of buttons we want. Do we want yes and no buttons? Do we want OK cancel buttons? So this would actually be some value that represents those types of buttons. Let's take a look at a simple example of using the show function. So here's some code. So let's see what's going on here. So we have a variable called choice, and this is of type dialog result, and that's because this is going to store the result of our show function. So the next line we see that we're calling the messagebox.show function, so we would type messagebox.show, and then we see we have a couple of arguments in here. So the first argument, play again, is going to be the main message that appears in our box. The caption argument says poker, so that's our string there. That's going to be the title that's displayed in our dialog box. And then our third argument is going to have messageboxbuttons.yesno. So this is saying that our dialog box is going to have yes and no buttons. So we see that this function is going to display a dialog box. In fact, here's what it looks like. Pretty straightforward. So as we mentioned, play again is our main message. Poker is our title, so you can see that in the top. And then we see that we're using yes, no buttons. So in fact, we see buttons yes and no that appear here. So when we click on either yes or no, one of those values gets stored in choice. The way it works is, since these values are of type dialog result, the way you would actually check it, you would have to do dialog result.yes or dialog result.no. So if I click on yes, then choice is going to store the value dialog result.yes. If you click on no, choice is going to store dialog result.no. So then we need to perform some action depending on what button we click on. So we're saying here, as we mentioned, if we click on yes, then our choice is going to store yes if we click on that button. And if we click no, then choice is going to store no. So now we're going to check to see what happens. So we have our if-then statement that says if choice equals dialog result.no, so this is saying, did we click on the no button? If this is true, then we're going to execute me.close, which, as we've seen before, just simply closes the entire application.